Hello, welcome to my presentation on Kant's notion of enlightenment applied to university. So, to summarize Kant's notion of enlightenment, because we have to summarize it before we can apply it to university. So, when primitive humans first became conscious and developed the ability to think, error was born. The mind works in such a way that it is possible for a false notion to appear true to our consciousness, which can get passed down and crystallized in tradition. So I'm saying we're fallible. We're possible of being wrong. The ideas that get in our head can be erroneous. And this is where enlightenment comes about, because those ideas that are passed down in tradition over and over and over again just get accepted blindly. And the enlightened person is a person who questions it. The greatest example of this is God. From time immemorial, humanity has been passing down this error from generation to generation, with most accepting the tutelage of their religious leaders. How many actually question these ideas? I think it's very admirable that Albert Einstein, born a Jew, questioned his tradition, because it's different from me, because I was born atheist, so I didn't have to overcome that. But Albert Einstein, being born a Jew, had to question practically his whole reality. Like, it's almost like a Truman Show type of thing, where it's like you realize everything you live in is the Matrix. So there's definitely a herd element that goes along with the tradition part. So an example, most take it as a given that God is real, but most fail to even question this supposition. Most, from an attachment to the fantasy of an afterlife, refuse to question this belief. The enlightened, exercising their reason, ask, how did the phenomenon of the idea come to be? How did the phenomenon of Jesus capture the world? See, instead of taking this theory as given, they are asking questions about what they perceive. They perceive change in the world and they ask how. They perceive creation and they ask how. They perceive that God not exists, the idea of God exists, and they ask how. They're not jumping to any conclusions. They're not taking what tradition has told them and accepting it as true. That's the main difference of a person who's enlightened and not enlightened. Is the person who is not enlightened accept what tradition puts on them, whereas the enlightened person asks questions. So it's far from obvious that the answers to these questions result from supernatural causation, and quite comically, those who embody this relentless curiosity tend to be crucified according to the archetype of Jesus. And not only that, I just think it's funny. It takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a Christian, because they fail to imagine any other answer. Like, they say, oh, you think the universe came out of nothing? Well, that's stupid. It must be God. But their failure of faith, they can't imagine anything else, whereas those who have faith in cause and effect accept the mystery, whereas others cannot deal with the mystery. So, applied to university, Kant's enlightenment is most easily understood in relation to dogmatism. But to think that this strictly applies to religion is not correct. Dogmatism finds equal expression in the university as well as in church. So, the dogmatism of the church, they'll say, here's the bread and here's the wine or the juice, and this is the blood and body of Christ. And people regurgitate that and regurgitate that, and that's the dogmatism of the church, which I think is easily understood. But to me, the dogmatism in the university is no different, because professors preach and students regurgitate. So I have an example from my Arab feminist studies class, and we had to read this little article and answer this question: discuss how Fearless affected the writer's self-confidence in Women at Point Zero. So the reason I think that 90% of the students that answer this question are unenlightened, because the presupposition right in this question is that Firdaus affected the writer's self-confidence. So that's what the professor thinks, puts that in the question, and let's just see how many students even question this presupposition, because when I read the article, I found zero evidence that the self-confidence of the writer was affected. So let's watch. I believe Firdaus affected the writer's self-confidence because after she told her story, ... accepted the dogmatism. Firdaus affected the writer's self-confidence by showing the author a side of society she may not have been exposed to. Firdaus greatly impacted the writer's self-confidence. I believe that Firdaus' story greatly affected as well as reassured... Okay, I'm wrong about that one. Firdaus affected Nawal's self-confidence in the book Women at Point Zero. The writer's self-confidence is negatively impacted by Firdaus. I think Firdaus did affect the writer's... Okay, so I think we're starting to get the point where, like, all these students are regurgitating this same idea. Whereas me, I wrote, there isn't a word in either of these articles about Nawal El-Saadawi's self-confidence. So the reason I think that signifies this distinction between enlightenment and unenlightenment is that the professor put forward that prejudice and every student accepted it blindly. But, you know, maybe fairly you want to say that, oh, Ethan, you're being arrogant. That's fine. Let's talk about the tradition of philosophy, because, frankly, the tradition of philosophy is downright shameful. So I'm taking an existentialism class, and in this existentialism class, we're going over Heidegger and Sartre and Camus and existentialist thinkers. And in my class, we were talking about existence precedes essence. And I asked questions to the teacher, like, you know, what is essence? And, you know, how does existence precede essence? And they give the example of a pair of scissors, and, you know, the essence of the scissors is to cut. But this cutting isn't inherent to the scissors. So they think that's existence precedes essence. But then I question, well, is the essence of the scissors to cut, or is it the essence of scissors to have this particular shape? And I was told, Ethan, if you don't understand it our way, you're never going to understand it. So I'm asking questions according to the strict definitions, and the teacher is, according to the definition of dogmatism, preaching what she has learned in university as incontrovertibly true. And nobody else is asking questions. What I'm trying to say is that there is equal elements of dogmatism in both university and church. And the number of people who question their professors, who even view their professors as equals, it's so sad that people think professors are authorities, because I'm telling you, nature is laughing to the bank over all of us because nobody's superior to another person. Nobody is more of an authority on truth than another person. Having a degree does not make you an authority over another person. So, the goal of this essay was to get a C. The goal of this essay was to get a degree. But what I tried to communicate in this essay was I wanted to bring more mindfulness to the dogmatism of the university, and I wanted to bring more mindfulness to the lack of enlightenment in university, and I want to bring more mindfulness to how students can be enlightened in the same way as followers of a religion can be enlightened. So I'm sure you got plenty of critiques, and I'm sure this presentation will not be good.